You're listening to a podcast by the Center for Action and Contemplation. To learn more, visit cac.org.
Greetings, I'm Jim Finley. Welcome to Turning to the Mystics. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our time together, turning for trustworthy guidance to T.S. Eliot's poem, Four Quartets. In the introductory session that I did with Kirsten, we noted that the autobiographical foundations of T.S. Eliot's poetry is a theme of suffering. And it comes at a societal level in that he lived through the First World War and then also lived through the Second World War. So he knew this widespread despair and trauma and nightmare and chaos. And in a poem he wrote called The Wasteland, it captured that despair and the darkness of the world. But later on, as his life moved on, we see in this poem Ash Wednesday, and in this poem, Four Quartets, a new theme emerging. And the theme that's emerging is the theme of offering guidance in finding our way to be experientially grounded in God's presence in our life that transcends the suffering, sustains us in the suffering, and an inner peace that doesn't necessarily take away the suffering, but it delivers us from the tyranny of suffering, because the love of God we're learning to be established in sustains us in it and transcends it. So really the poem is about experiential salvation. It's a poem of this transformative awakening of ourselves, which makes them among the mystics we explore together in these reflections. So the theme then is really, for Eliot, is that the foundations of suffering, or just use the word trauma like woundedness, the foundations of our traumatizations, great and small, that can and sometimes do occur, are not found among the traumatizing things that can and sometimes do happen, as terrible as they might be. Nor are the foundations present in the way they access us and linger on within us as symptoms of traumatization, as challenging as those might be. The root of suffering is the traumatized capacity to abide in the presence of God that alone is ultimately real. And so how can we find guidance to be experientially established in that, which understands as Christ consciousness? And the whole poem is going to gravitate toward the mystery of the cross. So with that then, we'll begin by noting too that the poem Four Quartets actually consists of four poems that are intimately related to each other that continue to explore this theme of deliverance from suffering in the midst of suffering, deliverance from death in the midst of death. And so the first poem, Burnt Norton, begins first, as we saw, as an actual place. And T.S. Eliot's first theme is the way we can begin to be delivered from the tyranny of suffering is to be delivered from a claustrophobic understanding of time. They were kind of trapped in a one-dimensional experience of time. And so the whole poem invites us to prayerfully reconsider or reflect upon how to find our way to the eternality of God that transcends and permeates time as deliverance. And so the setting for the poem, Burnt Norton, is an actual place. It's the charred ruins of a manor house. And where in the past, in time, a horrendous series of events happened. That the person in this manor house fell in love with this woman. He began to court her, took her to the manor house. She said she'd marry him. She said, the butterfly needs wings. If you build an extension on both sides of your manor house. And he did. She moved in, and it turned out to be a horrible, horrendous thing, and she cheated on him. And so in a kind of a blind rage, he killed her, set the manor house on fire, and then killed himself. So that's where the poem starts. So the poem really is like Golgotha, that is, it starts in a place, and when we go there, you can go there and visit it. So we're in the charred ruins of this abandoned manor house, and we can feel the heaviness of what happened here, all this. And so this takes us to the charred ruins of the places in our life where trauma happened, the places in the world where it's happening now. And the scene of Burnt Norton becomes a kind of metaphorical place of suffering, both in the past and how it lives on within us. And in this context, then, he's going to guide us in this journey of awakening, of experiential salvation. So I'm going to read the first stanza of Burnt Norton. And notice also the poem is divided into Roman numerals. And so this is the first stanza, Roman numeral 1, how the poem starts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the poem and pause and share with you what I see in it. Because like with all these mystics we've been studying, it's very dense. It's poetically dense. And so I'm going to share with you what's helped me to what I see in it. So as you listen to this, it will help you to see what you see in it. Because really it's an invitation to be guided into these interior sensitivities within ourselves. So with that, then we'll begin. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. So if in the past, this horrendous event happened here at Burnt Norton, what happened in the past lives on when we're there. We can feel the weight of the tragedy that's there. And in all the years yet to come, anyone who goes there is aware of it. They'll feel the weight of it too. So if all time is present, it's locked in. Likewise, in our own life, if we've been through things in the past that were traumatizing, even though the event was past, it'll always be the past, our past, that we remember. And when it comes to mind, we feel the pain of it and how it affects us. And no matter how long we live, it'll always still be the past up to the very moment we die. And in that sense, then, time is unredeemable if it's locked in. What he's going to try to show us is that it's not locked in. This is what the poem's about, really. So it's like a meditation on how we experience our temporal self and our passage through time from birth to death, and also the passage of time of the world and of history. Because if it's all locked in that way, what might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. In other words, yes, this did happen here at this manor house. But you know what? What if it wouldn't have happened? But what could have happened remains a coulda, shoulda, woulda. So even though we can consider what could have happened, maybe he could have avoided doing that or could have avoided, the point is it's all an idle speculation in the mind, in your life, in my life. What might have been and what has been point to one end which is always present. And that's what's always present. What's always present is what was. What's always present is what could have been and wasn't. And that could have been that wasn't. And what was live on in our present as we look at our life. And this is what life is like. So he's inviting us to slow down, almost like in psychotherapy, to pay very close attention to the nature of our consciousness, like how we can kind of settle in this. And by the way, when we settle in like this, we're settling into it in a moment of time. Namely, this moment of time in which we're listening to Eliot guide us into this deeper awareness of time. Footfalls echo in the memory, down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind. So footfalls echo in the memory. That is, there's these footfalls, but where do the footfalls go? Toward the passage we didn't take, the door we didn't open. In the light of the poem, what's the door we never opened? Mysticism. We never considered, we never opened the door of eternality. It's true that our body's born, everything born in time dies in time. But we never consider that although our body born in time dies in time, in the deathless beauty of ourselves as God's beloved, we're eternal. We never paused to take into account the eternality of ourselves. That which never passes away, that keeps unfolding and everything endlessly passing away. And so this is where the poem is taking us now. My words echo thus in your mind. And they echo there like we pause to ponder this. This is like a deep thought. I mean, we just don't look at this in passing and, next insight, please. We're kind of sitting with something. But to what purpose? See, disturbing dust on a bowl of rose leaves, I do not know. In other words, why do this at all? Why? Because in the ego self that lives in one-dimensional time, it's of no purpose. But in the poetic language that opens up the layers of the soul, it's beyond purpose. It opens out upon the divinity of ourself, like the eternality of time. Because it's also true that although we are in a place of suffering, of something in the past that happened, and we feel it now in the present, that's also true. There's other things there. When we start to open the door of spiritual awakening, the stanza continues. Other echoes inhabit the garden. See, it's true that suffering's there, echoes of the suffering, but there's other echoes inhabit the garden. Shall we follow? And we know we are because he's going to take us there. Quick, said the bird, find them, round the corner, through the first gate, into the first world. Shall we follow the deception of the thrush into our first world? I'd like to reflect on this. See, what is the first world in the big picture? In the opening words of Genesis, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. That's the first world. Let there be light. God speaking light and time and you and me and the whole world is perpetual and boundaryless. That's the first door. So we're going to go back to the beginning. Because for God to begin the beginning, God had to be there before the beginning to begin the beginning. And that's the door. And that's where we're headed. Back this place, this emergence from things. Through the first gate into the first world, shall we follow the deception of the thrush? A lot of times it's so personal what to make of what he's saying. I think it's this way, is the thrush, the bird leading us into these deeper places, but the ego and claustrophobic time is skeptical. Like St. Augustine says, we have to believe in order to understand. Because it's not deception. It's deception not to listen to the thrush. It's a deception not to let ourselves go deeper into our first world. There they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves in the autumn heat. And there they were. Who's they? It's the dead. Not just the man and woman who died there are there because they're deathless too. Nobody dies. But it's all the dead. All the dead are there. He keeps alluding to things. He's trying to help us be experientially sensitive to what faith proclaims. When I was in the monastery, an old lay brother died, and Thomas Merton spoke that day to the novices about death. He said, it's very important to keep in mind that when we die, we don't go anywhere when we die, like to some far off place. Because Scripture says, in God we live and move and have our being. We're living out our lives in the vast interiority of God. We're like manifestations of God, living in the interiority of God, seeking God. Seeking God because we've lost the awareness of the divinity of our situation, which is suffering. And not only are we living our life in God and we're present in God, but all those who have passed through the veil of death have crossed over into God. And they're here, which is the communion of saints. Sometimes when a loved one dies, there's this horrendous pain of the absence of the beloved, like it's an unbearable thing. But as time passes, we begin to feel the deathless presence of the beloved. And so this is the communion of saints. So right now as I'm speaking this, and right now as you're listening to this, you and I are together in the interiority of God. And all the dead are here with us. All the angels are here. All the saints are here. Everything is here. And we don't see it. See, we might put it another way. What we're getting at here is we don't see the dead for the same reason we don't see God. Because in the one-dimensional temporal time of the ego, it lives at the surface of things. So what the poem is doing is slowly opening things up to poetically kind of sit with these deeper layers that we know by faith are there. and to help us be more present to it, more attentive to it. In the autumn heat, through the vibrant air, and the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery. It's the music that our finite ears can't hear. Just like it's the presence of the angels and the dead and God that our finite eyes can't see. St. John of the Cross talks about silent music. And I can remember in the monastery chanting the Psalms, the sense that chanting is an echo of that silent music of God through all of creation. And notice this poem has a certain cadence to it. It itself is kind of like a music. And as we listen to it and kind of let it have its way with us, it's opening up this deepening sensitivity to ourselves, the ultimate nature of our situation as we're here together. I want to skip down now 3 lines, because he's going to return now to the dead. You can see why. You don't want to just give them nodding assent and move on. The dead are here, for God's sakes. There they were as our guests, accepted and accepting. That is, there they were in this moment of time. We might say, therefore, there they are in this moment we're saying this and listening to this here together. And we accept them. We accept the deathless presence of the dead. And they accept us. They also accept us because they know we'll be joining them soon enough. We're all in this together. We're at the edge of eternity here, the passing away of time. And so there they were as our guest, accepted and accepting. So we moved, and they in a formal pattern along the empty alley. And so they moved along with us into the empty alley, into the box circle. So now there's a kind of a procession of the dead. And where we're headed to is in the garden of Burnt Norton. It's this poetic scene where this is occurring. So here we are with all the dead going into the garden. And at this point, it's already looking very differently than when we first arrived. It's just simply a tragic place where a tragic thing happened, because already it has a celestial kind of quality to it. To look down into the drained pool, dry concrete, brown-edged. So there's a pool. There's dead leaves at the bottom, brown-edged around the edge of this pool. And we come to the pool with the dead in this procession to the pool. And here's like a waking dream, like a poetic thing. And the pool was filled with water out of sunlight. So now the sunlight is the water, and it's filled with water out of sunlight. And the lotus rose quietly. And this is the first allusion to the mystical traditions. But he doesn't tell us where it's coming from. There's 2 references here to the lotus, which Eliot was very aware of. One is, in Kundalini Yoga, with the chakras at the spiritual centers, and the Kundalini ascends up the spine. In a state of enlightenment, it's a 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head. It's the light of the divinized self. And I think closer here to the lotus is in the story of the Buddha. It says that when the Buddha sat all night under the Bodhi tree, with great resolve not to get up until he discovered the liberation from suffering. That's why he sat there. And in the morning, when he turned and saw the day star, one way of putting it, he saw the divinity of the phenomenal world. He saw the eternal, boundaryless immediacy of life itself. And he was free from suffering. Because suffering is not to see that. See, samsara, to be caught in this closed world. And then the story says that when he was enlightened, he stayed there for several days. And he was inclined not to leave. And he was inclined not to leave, he said, because the people of the world don't want to hear this. We're attached to what binds us. It may be claustrophobic, but there's a perception of control in it. And if everything is unexplainably boundaryless in all directions, there'll be resistance. He went down to the edge of the water, and he looked in the water, and he saw lotus blossoms just starting to come up from the mud at the bottom up a little higher, up a little higher. And he saw a lotus that was just about to break the surface. And he said, there are those who are ready to hear this. And he set off on his mission of liberation and began to turn the wheel of the Dharma, the nirvanic peace. There's a Jesuit priest, Thomas Hand, who was a Zen sensei. We did a lot of sitting, zazen. And he used to have us chant over and over again, and he'd ring the bell. Slowly, slowly blooms the rose within. And by the way, insofar as we're moved by the beauty of these words, we are that lotus that's breaking the surface. And insofar as we're touched by this, we're grateful for hearing these words of liberation. And there they were. And so then we looked down into the surface of the water, made of sunlight. And then this lovely image, and there they were behind us, reflected in the pool. So we're looking into the pool, and over our shoulder, we see all the dead looking into the water with us over our shoulder, like we're all looking into the pool together. And then a cloud passes. And the image that I get of this, when the cloud passes, they're gone. But here's the point. It's just we don't see them, but we know they're there. That's the thing. That in moments of awakening, we get the intuition that in these quickening moments, it isn't that something more was given, but a curtain parted and we fleetingly taste the divinity of the depths that every moment is, including this moment. Go, said the bird, for the leaves are full of children. It's a lovely image. So not only are it's just the dead, but now the trees are full of children, hidden excitedly, containing laughter. All the trees are full of children who are laughing. Go, 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 said the bird. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. So true. But here's the point. It's almost as if in ego consciousness, we can't bear what we can't comprehend. We can't bear what we can't manage. But if the only thing that's real is what we can comprehend, it's myopic and claustrophobic. And so we can tell something's missing, but we're afraid to step beyond the boundary in which there's no control. So we can't bear very much reality, but deep down what festers is we can't bear the privations of reality, which are infinite and divine and are given to us as our life in each passing moment. Time past and time future, what might have been and what has been, point to one end which is always present, which is the end of this first section. I'm now going, in the second section, I want to skip the first stanza, I want to skip the second stanza and go to the very last stanza of part 2. And the first lines are, time past and time future, allow but a little consciousness. I'm going to start there. This is important. See, the first part up till now, in these mystical teachings, there are vision aspects and path aspects. The vision aspects bear witness to the divinity of the immediacy of what is. Being awakened to the divinity of what is, and then the light that shines out from that vision illumines the path that we might be habitually established in it. And this is the path. Time past and time future, allow but a little consciousness. To be conscious is not to be in time, but only in time can the moment in the rose garden, the moment in the arbor where the rain beat, the moment in the drafty church at smokefall, be remembered, involved with past and future. Only through time is time conquered. Almost always, these awakenings are very subtle. And in these moments where the awakening has happened, he calls it we're in consciousness. In other words, we might use we're in a meditative state. Or another word we might say, we're resting in contemplative attentiveness, spontaneously. That's what he's really talking about. And he says that in this state, we're not in time. We're in the eternality of ourselves. The divinity of God being infinitely poured out and given to us is standing up and sitting down is life. And then he gives 2 examples, and it's so helpful because notice these aren't ecstasies. or visions. These are so disarmingly simple, we might not think anything of it. One is you're out walking, and you're surprised it starts to rain. And so you rush ahead and get under the shelter of a grape arbor, of overarching grape arbor. And as you stand there, you can hear the large drops of water hitting on the leaves of the grape arbor. The other example, you're sitting alone in a darkening church, a smoke fall. And I think a smoke fall is the smoke of the village of people lighting fires in their homes, and you're all alone in this drafty church, a smoke fall, and this washes over you, consciousness that you're not in time. But it's only in such moments of time as time conquered. The trouble is, a moment in time, the time is conquered, but we don't linger there long enough to let it have its way with us. And this is what the poem is doing. It's holding us there. See? Because listening to the poem is actually listening to words that are coming from the poet's own attentiveness. And we can only follow, and echoing and following that awakens that attentiveness in us. So it's a moment of time that conquers time. Namely, and this is why in such of these moments, if they have duration this way, where you just rest in it, and you move on, you have to look at your wristwatch to see how much time passed because you weren't in time. You drop down into eternity. So here's the point, I think. You know, we are graced with these moments. I think we all are, from time to time. But what happens sometimes, we're so subtly moved by it. It matters in a way we can't explain, deepening presence of this. And we also sense in such moments, they're moments of homecoming. It helps us to realize, we get the feeling that in the momentum of the day, the complexities of the day's demands, we get this feeling that we're skimming across the surface of the depths of our own life. And we begin to realize, in the light of such moments as we listen to them, that we're suffering from depth deprivation, which is our homeland. All the more regrettable because God's unexplainable oneness with us is hidden in the depths over which we're skimming. And so what can happen then, and this is the grace of the path, is what starts to happen as we listen to these moments, we realize a longing to abide there. They're like moments where we fleetingly glimpse that without which our life will be forever incomplete. And the interesting key about it all is that although we waver and fluctuate in our distractedness from it, it never wavers in its eternal oneness with us. It's always right there with us, like touching us, touching us, touching us. And so then the question becomes, I'm awakened by a longing to abide. But how do I do that? Because the moments are fleeting. That's the point. They wash over me. They take me unawares. They're fleeting. So what am I to do? We saw this in all the mystics. It's really true that we can't make the moments of homecoming happen. That is, to be experientially grounded in the love of God that alone is ultimately real. That's true. But we can choose to assume the stance that offers the least resistance to be overtaken by what we cannot attain. We cannot attain it. We cannot reach it. But it attains us in our deep acceptance of our inability to attain it. And that's meditation practice. And it has to be a practice because it's a rendezvous. Put it another way, what the poem is reminding us of is that which is essential never imposes itself, which is God. That which is unessential is constantly imposing itself. That is that which is endlessly passing away, and the self that's identified with it is itself passing away. But there is that in all this passing away, that which never passes away, in the interior beauty of God's beloved, the deathless nature of ourself, and we never pass away. And so what we can do then is fidelity to a practice, right? And the point is this poem is that practice. That's the whole point. It's a prayer, really, when you think about it, seriously. And it's a prayer in this sense at two different levels. It's a prayer both that we saw in previous sessions. We go on a ladder to heaven, and Lectio Divina, discursive meditation and prayer. So Lectio Divina is sustained attentiveness to listening to words which resonate within us as God speaking personally to us, like we're touched by it. And so we read the poem out loud, or we listen to it out loud, and it could be anything that has this vibrancy to it, and ultimately to read the scriptures this way. So we know that in the word, in the Lectio, is attentiveness, and the poem holds us there in this attentiveness. So in effect, what God says to us then, now I spoke to you, now you talk to me, what do you think? In other words, you have to sign off on it. It's personal. What do you make of this? What about this strikes you, or what about it perplexes you, or what's this remind you of? What is it that's so sadly elusive? And yet at some level, it's reminding us that what's elusive isn't elusive at all. We just keep straying from it. And it's one with us in our elusiveness. That's why it overtakes us in the grape arbor and in the church, and lying awake at night listening to our own breathing or the smelling of flower. It overtakes us again and again and again and again. And so we can learn then to faithfully have a daily rendezvous of subtlety in the presence of God. And in the subtlety, we listen to God speak to us, the Lectio. We might journal out the meditatio, write it out. What is this to me? And then the prayer is the heart. Help me with this. Because we tell God, I can't draw closer to you without you drawing me to yourself. Or without you helping me to awaken that you're endlessly drawing me to yourself. Help me with this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And that's the practice, the path. Next, I want to go to the beginning. I want to end at the beginning with the Roman numeral 3, which is the next section. This is the very next stanza. So we're sitting in prayer. Here is a place of disaffection, time before and time after, in a dim light, neither daylight, investing form with lucid stillness. That is, it's not a light that illumines form with a certain stillness we can see, turning shadow into transient beauty. And the shadow doesn't turn into beauty. It isn't that. With slow rotation suggesting permanence, doesn't do that either. It's a beautiful thought. There is a slow rotation of the revolving of the turning world and time, but if we don't see it, turns into eternity. Nor darkness to purify the soul. There is darkness, but I don't think I'm getting purified. I'm still me sitting here. When I have 20 minutes to meditate, I have to go to work. I don't see the point. Emptying the sensual with deprivation. See, there is the sensual, but it doesn't really empty the sensual of deprivation. That is, it doesn't help me to see the sensual gratification, although it's a gift from God, is shallow water. This is the essence of addiction. It doesn't remove me from the gratification of the sensuality that keeps me in this place of gratification. Cleansing affection, like cleansing my heart, affectus of the heart, from the temporal. That is, it cleanses my affection from time. Time's not enough for me. Neither plenitude, it's not plenitude, and it's nor vacancy. Only a flicker over the strained, time-ridden faces. And these are now the people in the world. You look out at the people and all their faces. You're going to describe now this collective unawareness of the sadness of people. Over the strained, time-ridden faces. See, they're time-ridden. Distracted from distraction by distraction. It's like you go to the bakery, pull a number, I'll be distracted by you later. I'm being distracted by this now. And why are we afraid to not be distracted? We're afraid if we're not distracted, there's nothing there. There's a cartoon strip I used to read all the time called The Far Side. And it shows a little boy in bed at night looking up at the ceiling, scared. And he's scared because he's afraid there's a monster under his bed. And underneath the bed are two monsters lying there side by side, about 9 feet long. And one monster saying to the other, There it is again, Charlie, that eerie feeling somebody's up there. See, that's afraid. We're afraid to open the look. He doesn't want to look under the bed because if there is one, there'll be an irreversible situation. And so we just don't look. So we keep walking along because we're afraid to let go of what's unexplainably not enough for us. Filled with fancies and empty of meaning. Tumid apathy with no concentration. Men in bits of paper whirled by the cold wind that blows before and after time, wind in and out of unwholesome lungs, time before and after, and so on. And this is the collective diseasement of this, and we're among them. So the whole poem, it isn't as if you kind of sit and get started and you step into plenitude. What you step into is you sit into empty-handedness. But if you don't panic, you discover there's a kind of an integrity of your waiting heart. And even though the finite you and the ego might look like nothing's happening, you realize that a presence deeper than what you can feel is flowing out and giving itself to you. An understanding that you cannot comprehend is giving itself to you. You have to settle and be acclimated to it. It's a gift to want this, to be faithful to it. Each time you end your rendezvous, you ask God for the grace not to break the thread to these sensitivities as you go through your day. And as you go through your day, the thread will break many times. But here's what's different. You're aware that it's breaking. But what's different is you know and believe and trust that although it breaks many times from your end, it never breaks from God's end. And so when you come back for the next morning, you said, open the scriptures, light your candle, whatever it is. You say, where were we yesterday? Oh, yes. And that's the contemplative way of life. So I'm going to end here because I think really this is what the poem's about. Really, I get this feeling of what we're being led into. So we'll end with a meditation. And in the meditation, I'll invite us, we'll bow. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki says that when we bow, we give ourselves up. If ever you get to a place in life where the only thing you can do is bow, you should do it. And that's where we are now, as contemplative men and women. See, we give ourselves up to this presence. And then I'll say from the Psalms, be still and know I am God. Repeat after me. And I'll take off one word each time. I just say the word be, and I'll ring the bell 3 times. And then here in the session, we'll sit in silence for 1 minute. At the end of the 1 minute, I'll ring the bell once, we'll bow, we'll slowly say the Lord's Prayer together and name Mary Mother Contemplatives and 2 Christian mystics to bear witness. We're sitting there, one with all the lineages throughout the whole world and all the traditions, these paths. But in your own life as you sit there, sit as it's given for you to sit there. So I invite you to sit straight, fold your hands and bow. And repeat after me. Be still and know I am God. Be still and know I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. and bow. Mary, Mother of Contemplatives, pray for us. St. John of the Cross, pray for us. Julian of Norwich, pray for us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Turning to the Mystics, a podcast created by the Center for Action and Contemplation. We're planning to do episodes that answer your questions. So if you have a question, please email us at podcasts@cac.org or send us a voicemail. All of this information can be found in the show notes. We'll see you again soon.
Do you feel called to walk a more contemplative path? The Center for Action and Contemplation is an educational nonprofit supporting the journey of inner transformation. Our programs and resources will help grow your consciousness, deepen your prayer practice, and strengthen your compassionate engagement with the world. Learn more about our resources, such as publications, podcasts, email series, and events at www.cac.org.